Hi everyone, Crista Cowan here with another episode of The Barefoot Genealogist. Today we are talking about your genealogy brick walls. Now if you've joined us live before, you know that just to the side of the window, the video viewing window, there's a chat panel. You can log into that chat with your Facebook login and participate in that. Usually I can't get on chat until after the presentation, but today I have a colleague with me who is logged in on her computer, and she's going to be feeding me your questions. Now, hopefully, I know Livestream had a little bit of a hiccup just a few minutes ago. Hopefully it keeps working for us so that we can keep going. We'll spend about 30 minutes, about the normal time that we do for our show every Tuesday and Thursday, taking your questions. But before I jump into your questions, I wanted to go ahead and just share a few things with you. First, about some things that you can do on other places than Ancestry.com. And then second, we're going to talk about how to craft a research plan, which is hopefully going to then just lead us right into those genealogy brick walls of yours. So let's dive in. First, let me just share with you a little infographic that we made yesterday. This is called 10 Things to Do Beyond Ancestry.com. And basically it's just, you can find it on Pinterest. Ancestry.com has a Pinterest page. Tons of fun things up there that I try to pin on a fairly regular basis. So you probably can't read this here, but when you go to Pinterest, you'll be able to read it on the screen there. Now let me just read through some of these things really quickly so that you get a feel for some of the things that you can do to get your genealogy fixed today. First is call up your oldest living family member and ask them those questions you've been meaning to ask. A lot of times we think we have to wait till the perfect circumstance or till we're face to face, but even just a quick phone call and ask them one or two questions can yield some really great information and some excellent family stories. The second thing you could do is you could go into Family Tree Maker. Now, of course, hopefully you recognize that you do not have to be connected to the internet to use Family Tree Maker. That's one of the benefits of it, is that it allows you to have your tree synced with your online tree from Ancestry.com, and then when you're not connected to the internet, you can still access all of your family data in Family Tree Maker. So go into Family Tree Maker. In there they have a report you can run. It's called a data error report. And that will help you find any out-of-order children, any data entry problems, any dates you've got wrong in your database, that just to help you kind of clean things up a little bit. Third, and this is the one we're going to focus on today, is pick an ancestor, maybe create a timeline of their life, and then look for holes in your research. Well, oftentimes the brick walls that we have in our research are brick walls of our own creation. Things we've overlooked, things that we don't know, which is fine because, we don't know what we don't know. But a research plan or a timeline, and then building a research plan, is a really good way to help find some of those holes so that you know exactly what it is that you're looking for. Now, I'm not going to read through the rest of these 10 items. I just wanted to give you a feel or a flavor for some of the additional things you can do to get your genealogy fixed today. You can go to, again, the Ancestry.com Pinterest page and pull up this little infographic to read the rest for yourselves. So let's talk then about this research plan. This is what I mean, and this is the process that I go through when I'm working on a particularly difficult research problem. The first question I always ask myself is, what do I know? Okay, what do I know about the person or the family unit that I am trying to research? And then this is an important question that sometimes gets overlooked. How do I know that information? Where did that information come from? Is it just family lore? Is it something, that my mom or my grandma told me? Do I have any actual documentation, census records, birth, marriage, and death records, military records, newspaper articles, whatever? Or did I just find it on somebody else's family tree? So what do you know and how do you know it? And then this is another key to this. What do you want to learn about that person or that family? And the answer to that question cannot be everything, because if the answer to that question is everything, there's no way to formulate a really specific plan. It's kind of like the difference between being really focused on something versus a scattershot approach. And so you need to be able to articulate what it is that you want to learn. So with that little 5-minute introduction, I know several of you have questions, but I think a couple of you have kind of preemptively said that you've got one ready to go. So Lisa, I think Karen, was she first on the list?
Yes, Karen Kennison.
Karen Kinnison, I saw that you posted that you had a question, and so we're going to give you just a moment to go ahead and type that question up. And if you can follow the formula on the screen, that's great. If you want to be a little bit more concise for brevity, I understand. And then while Karen's typing her question, who's next on deck? Lisa Harrison said she also has a question. So Lisa Harrison, if you want to get yours ready while we're waiting for Karen to start typing, that would be great. I know my colleague Lisa is sitting next to me, and she's monitoring the chat here and trying to make sure that she captures the information. And if you've ever been on chat with us, you know that screen moves very quickly, so capturing some of that information is sometimes a little bit challenging. But I have faith that she'll do a good job. She's laughing at me, but.
Okay, we're waiting for Karen still.
And while we're waiting for Karen, do we have another question?
I have Lisa's ready.
Oh, Lisa's already ready. Okay.
So my third great grandfather was born in about 1782 in Virginia. He died between 1833 and 1840 in Kentucky. I have a copy of a marriage bond from 1809. Cannot find anything else out about him. Would like to find out his parents' names.
Okay, look at that. She followed the formula exactly, and I'm going to have you reread that. And I'm actually going to type it in here to this form here, just so you guys get an idea of, again, how I do this. So her third great-grandfather was born
in 1782 in Virginia.
1782 in Virginia.
He died between 1833 and 1840 in Kentucky.
Say it again, 33 and 43?
Through 1840.
Okay, in Kentucky. Okay.
She has a copy of his marriage bond from 1809.
Married in 1809.
Cannot find out anything else about him. Would like to find out his parents.
Okay, and so the record that she has is a marriage bond, and what she wants to learn are the parents' names for this third great-grandfather, okay? I put my apostrophe in the wrong place. There we go. Okay, so that, again, is kind of the process that I go through just to make sure I've got all of the pieces. What do you know? So she's done that really well. How does she know it, and what does she want to learn? Now, Lisa, I don't know if you can do this interactively with us at all or not, but you said that you have a marriage bond, and that marriage bond likely has information about the year that he was married and where, but I'm wondering how you know when and where he was born, and where that information came from. Because if you're looking for his parents' names, that birth information, of course, is going to be fairly critical. So I don't know if Lisa's responding at all while you're doing that. While she's doing that, let me just talk about a marriage bond for just a minute. A marriage bond in Virginia, I imagine, even though she didn't state that explicitly. Marriage bonds were created for the purpose of stating an intention to marry. And the groom or his bondsman had to put up money stating that he was eligible to be married, meaning not already married, that there was nothing preventing that marriage, as a promise to the bride and her family that he would marry her. And if he did not marry her, or if some reason was found why he couldn't marry her, he forfeited that bond. Now, very often, if you look here, it says, let's see, if he was born in 1782, that means he was about 26 or 27 years old when he decided to get married. And I don't know his financial circumstances, but if he could not afford to put up the bond, very often family members would participate in that. So I would take a look, Lisa, at that marriage bond again and see who the bondsmen are for your third great-grandfather. Very often, it's going to be a father. If the father is deceased, it might be an uncle on either the mother's or the father's side of the family, or sometimes possibly even an older brother. So figure out who that person is that's listed, and sometimes there's multiple people. Sometimes there are a couple of bondsmen. See who those people are that are listed on that marriage bond. See if you can rule them out as potential parents or potential father for this person in your family tree. Does Lisa have anything else to add there?
She does. She says, I've been working with another family researcher who's done extensive research and has written a book on the family. The only other thing he had was an arrest warrant from his future bride's father. No other names were on the marriage bond record other than the bride's presumed father, maybe a brother.
Okay. So that gets a little bit trickier. I assume that you know the last name of this particular individual, since you know about when he was born, you also know when he would have turned 21. And in the state of Virginia kept really excellent tax rolls. So tax rolls are probably the next place that I would go to find him on the tax rolls around the time he turns 21, and see if you can find him in successive tax rolls up until his marriage. And then what you're going to want to look for in that same time period and that same place are other men living in the same community with the same last name. Look a couple years before he turned 21 and a couple years after he turned 21. See if there are other men listed on those tax records with the same last name. Now, if it's a unique last name, you may only have one or two. If it's a very common surname, you may have 10 or 12. Then you take those 10 or 12 men and you work your way through census records and through other, through probate records, other records, trying to go through a process of elimination to say, well, this guy can't be the father because he never had children, and this guy can't be the father because, he's old enough to be the grandfather and he didn't have children that young. And this guy, you'll work through that process of elimination after you collect some of these potential men off of those tax lists. Okay, well, hopefully that gives Lisa a little bit of direction or some new ideas for working through her particular research challenge. Let me go ahead and clear my screen here, and then has Karen given us her?
Yes.
Okay, give me just 2 seconds, and then I will see if I can type as you talk.
Okay, so Karen has her great-grandfather was born and raised in Ohio. His birth was October 1841.
In Ohio, right?
In Ohio,
okay.
And he died in October 1923.
Does she say where?
No.
Okay.
But she has the census and his 11 children.
Census with him as an adult.
But she can't go back any further. She has a census and the death certificate and a newspaper clipping, but nothing else.
Okay, census, death certificate.
And a newspaper clipping.
And newspaper clippings. Okay, and what is it? Does she say what she wants, what she's looking for specifically?
It does not, but I would assume to get back further on the tree.
Okay, so again, being able to state what it is that you're looking for is what's going to help you craft a research plan. So, Karen, you don't say which census records you have, but just to make sure that you've got a checklist of sorts, you should be able to locate this man on the 1850, 1860, 1870, 1880. Of course, 1890 census is gone. It was destroyed. 1900 and 1910 and 1920 census records. Okay. Now, presumably, 1870 through 1920 is him as an adult with a spouse and children. But that 1850 and maybe that 1860 census, he would still be a child living in the household of his parents. You state that he's born in Ohio, so my question back to you would be, is that consistent? In the census records that you have found, do they all say Ohio? On the death certificate, does it also say Ohio? The next thing you would need to do then is to go to a map for the state of Ohio to get an idea for what the boundaries were in 1841. I think I've shared this with some of you before, but one of my favorite mapping programs, just for quick reference, it's called mapofus.org. Mapofus.org, and it takes you to a map of the United States, just a really basic map. You can click on any state, and it will take you to a map that shows the formation of that state over time. So I could jump right down here in the timeline to, let's see, 1839, just to get a feel for, what did the state look like at the time that he was born? 1840, 1841. If you can discover the county, if there's any record that lists the county that he was born in, or if you can find him in that 1850 census as a child, and use that as kind of a jumping off point for what county is the family living in 1850. One of the things that I use a ton are the family and local histories on Ancestry.com. And most of the counties in Ohio participated in that project to create some kind of a local history for their county. And if he was there that early, it's very possible that he some siblings, his parents, an uncle, a grandfather, somebody in the family might be mentioned in one of those local history books. So anything further from Karen that she wants to clarify?
She has most of those, but not 1850, that he was living with other people in 1860.
Okay, so in 1860, yeah, he was 19 years old, 18 years old. It's very possible he was living and working out. And so I would start with where he's living in 1860 and see if you can find other family members with the same last name in the 1850 census. And I think, Karen, you've been around a little bit. I know you've spent some time with us before, so you know that sometimes you have to get a little creative with your census searching. So try searching for him without a name, with no name at all. Just put in the name of the county in the lived-in field, put in that birth year of 1841, plus or minus a couple years, that birthplace of Ohio, and just see what comes up. Maybe filter down to just males. My guess is you'll have a list of 300 or 400 people by the time you do that, maybe less. And then you can just quickly skim through that list. It'll be alphabetical. Skim through that list and see if there's a name on that list that looks like what his name might be. That 1850 census, some of them had very, very sloppy handwriting. Some of those old records are very faded, and so when they were transcribed, the transcriptions may have come out a little bit funny. So that's what I would do to attack that 1850 census, and then that 1850 census might give you some additional clues to where the family was actually living when he was born in 1841. Okay, do we have another question?
Yes, from Stephanie Martinez.
Okay.
Her second great-grandparents were listed in, and excuse my pronunciation, Tiget, T-I-G-E-T, Creek, Oklahoma. So Tiget.
T-I-G-E-T? Okay.
Creek, Oklahoma, about 1930, listed as mixed-blood Cherokees. They aren't found for 1900 in Oklahoma or Indian Territory. I know for a fact they were living in Oklahoma because they died there.
Okay, so they died in Oklahoma. So then my next question to Stephanie would be, she says they're living in Tiger Creek in 1930, but is that
Tiger.
on?
She misspelled.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Tiger Creek?
Yeah.
Tiger Creek, okay. In 1930. So my question is that from a census record, or is that from an Indian roll, or what type of a record is it that she found them on?
Let us know.
I'm sure she will. There's a little bit of a delay. There's about a 2 or 3 second delay from what I say to the time you get it.
Correct. Census report is what she said.
Okay. So she has the 1930 census for this family. And I'm assuming that they're adults in the 1930 census. She says they died in Oklahoma. And so, again, the question would be, how does she know that? Does she have a death record? And then you may have said it, Lisa, I just might have missed it. What is it that she's trying to discover about them?
She wasn't specific.
Okay.
She says they are not found for 1900. So it seems to me she's looking for them in 1900 census.
Okay, so she's looking for them in the 1900 census specifically, and I think you said she said she looked in Oklahoma or Indian Territory. Okay, so one of the things that anybody needs to know when they're doing family history research is a little bit about the timeline of the location that you're researching. So Oklahoma did not become a state until 1907. And don't ask why I have random pieces of information like that in my head. Sometimes it just happens. But Oklahoma became a state in 1907. And so the 1900 census was a really good indicator for the federal government when they took the census of the Indian Territory about who was living there and what was happening in that location before they became a state. However, Oklahoma also, as part of their application or petition for statehood, had a territorial census that was completed. And I don't remember off the top of my head now if that was done just before the 1900 census or just after the 1900 census. But I would maybe see if I could get my hands on that territorial census. It would have been done before 1907, and see if you can find them on that particular record. Now, Stephanie doesn't state whether she's found them in 1910 and 1920 as well. If she hasn't, then that would be the next step. If you've got them in 1930, trying to jump straight to 1900, that's a bit of a gap. But if you walk your way back through the censuses one at a time, 1920, 1910, look for that territorial census, 1900. That gives you a little bit more control because you know how the families slightly changed over time. If the 1930 census is the only record you're going off of, you don't know who gave that census taker that information. That it could have been the next door neighbor or the guy down the street. It could have been a child. And so if you only have one single piece of evidence about them, if that information is wrong, all of the assumptions that you're using to perform your searches might also be wrong. And so, again, if you can go back census by census, that methodical approach is going to give you get you a little closer to the truth, so that each time minor differences in information and in facts are going to help you get a little closer. Lisa's nodding at me over here.
She says she has found them in the census reports there.
So 1920 and 1910 as well, is what I assume, yeah. Okay. And she doesn't state like how old they are, when they got married, and we don't necessarily need all those details right now. We're not going to solve her problem in this moment. But what the exercise that we're going through here, and I want to make a point of this to everybody. The exercise that we're going through right here is an exercise that I go through regularly with my own research. I type it up, I make sure I understand what it is that I know, how I know it, specifically what I'm looking for. And I do this before my fingers ever touch a keyboard to start searching, because I want to make sure I understand all the different spelling variations. And so Stephanie, maybe that's something that you want to, an exercise you want to go through. Look at that surname and see if you can come up with all of the different spelling variations for that particular surname. Same thing with given names, although that's a little trickier. I think I've used this example before, but Ancestry.com keeps track of course, with 14 billion records on our website, we keep track of all the different spelling variations for different names. And the name Catherine is always one of my favorite examples. So think about all the different ways that you've seen the name Catherine spelled. All the different nicknames, right? So we've got Catherine with a K or with a C, with an E in the middle or not. You've got Kathy and Kat and Katie, Kitty. Like there's all these different nicknames. And then you have the foreign versions, Ekaterina, right? Okay. Now, if I was to sit down and make a list of all of the possible spelling variations for Catherine, all the nicknames, all the different ways that it comes out in records, I could probably come up with maybe 30. Ancestry.com has discovered over 900 of them. 900 different variations, more than, of that one name. And so going through this exercise is really useful to try to figure out all the possible spelling variations. And then when you think about spelling variations, you also have to think about handwriting variations. So for example, my great-grandfather's name was Frederick. His first name was spelled Fredrick. But the way that K got written, sometimes it looked like an H. And so, again, you have to think about different ways that letters get written and how that might look to somebody who is indexing that record. So, Stephanie, my advice to you, create a list of all of the different possible spelling variations of that surname. If they lived consistently in Tiger Creek in all 3 censuses, maybe just do a no-name search in the 1900 census with the lived-in location of Tiger Creek, see if that brings up anything. Again, like I mentioned earlier, I think it was to Karen, you have a list of people then who are living in that location, and usually it's going to be alphabetical by last name, and you can go through it fairly quickly. So hopefully that was a little bit helpful. I think we have time, Lisa, for one more question.
We have a really great quick general question from Jill Roberts. She wants to know, what do you do when there are different states listed on censuses for birth and you have no other leads?
Okay. Yeah, so I don't know if you heard, let me just reiterate the question. Jill asked, what do you do when there's conflicting information on census records about a birthplace? So it says, in one census, maybe it says Ohio, and in the next one it says Iowa, and in the next one it says Indiana. As a matter of fact, my biggest brick wall is a great-grandfather. His name is John O'Brien, which doesn't help because that's about as common as it gets. He was born in the 1840s, but different reports of his birth, and not just on census records, but in his military records as well, list variations of up to 10 years in his age difference. And his birth is reported in various places on census records, in military records, in his obituary, as either Ohio, Indiana, or Ireland. And so, yeah, how do you deal with that? Well, obviously he's my brick wall, so I haven't resolved it yet, but here are a couple of things that you can do. First of all, I actually created a video called Resolving Conflicting Evidence, where I walk through the process that I use, and I use a spreadsheet usually to do this, to outline every piece of information I've collected about a person so that I can look for patterns. So for example, if Ohio comes up over and over and over again, that doesn't mean it's right, okay? So he could have said Ohio 9 times and then one record says Ireland. That one record could be accurate. The key to resolving conflicting evidence is to understand who provided the information. So on census records, I think I've mentioned this, you don't know who provided the information. On military records, it's usually the person themselves. On a death record, it's usually a grieving family member. And so understanding why different records were created and who the informant was on those different records helps you know a little bit better which records to trust and which records to look at a little bit more suspiciously. So again, the name of that video is Resolving Conflicting Evidence, where I actually walk through step by step how I go through and do that with spreadsheets and all of the information that I have available. So you might want to take a look at that. Any other quick questions? It looks like we've got about 3.5 minutes.
I can give you just one more really quick one from Mark. His parents were married in New York City in 1938. He's found each of them in the 1920 and the 1940 federal census, and the 1915 and 1925 New York state censuses. He has been unable to find his mother in the 1930 federal census, which is what might be a clue as to how they met.
Aha, that's a great question. So I'll just repeat it again because I don't know how close Lisa's sitting to my microphone and if it's being picked up or not, but hopefully you've seen what I've typed on my screen here. So Mark's parents were married in New York City in 1938. It says he's found that marriage record. He's found both parents independently, obviously, before they got married in the 1920 census. He's found them together as a couple in the 1940 census. And then I'm glad he brought this up because this is an important overlooked resource sometimes, which is the state censuses. Federal censuses are every 10 years on the 10s. State censuses, a lot of times when they exist, are every 10 years on the 5s. And so he's filled in that gap before 1920, that gap after 1920, but what he's looking for is that 1930 census, and he said the reason he's looking for that is because it might provide some clues as to how or where his parents met. And again, I just want to commend him for not just looking for the records or trying to fill in the blanks on a pedigree chart, but he's actually, it sounds like, looking for a story, which I think is terrific, to look at the records and recognize that they can tell you a story. So he hasn't found his mother on the 1930 census. So I don't want to reiterate, I don't want to rehash some of the things that I've just said, but I do have an entire video on the YouTube channel. It's called Finding Missing People in the Census, where I walk through probably 4 or 5 different strategies, other than the couple that I've already shared with you today, for locating those missing people. Now, Mark doesn't state it, but I have a sneaking suspicion that his mother probably wasn't living in New York City in 1920 or 1925. Maybe she's living in the state elsewhere, or maybe he's just looking for her in that 1930 census to find the specific neighborhood of New York City that she's living in. But again, it's Finding Missing People in the Census. You'll find it on the Ancestry.com YouTube channel. I'll walk through 4 or 5 different strategies for locating missing people in the census. Okay, well, that's all we have time for today. Lisa, thank you very much for your help. I appreciate it. I can see that she has a page full of notes over here, which means that you all have lots and lots of questions. So I'm going to give one last piece of advice. Okay, I will be on chat right after this, and I'll try to answer some additional questions. But I would encourage you to look at this formula again that I've got here on the screen. Let me just clear Mark's research problem here. Look at this formula here on the screen and see if you can't really clearly articulate your research problem into these 3 questions. What do you know and how do you know it? And then what specifically do you want to learn? and then take that piece of information over to the Ancestry.com Facebook page, or even better, to the Facebook group. Our Facebook group is very active with lots of helpful genealogists, myself included. And if you do a post with this information, just say, here's my brick wall, I'd love some help with it. List your answers to each of these 3 questions, and you might be amazed at how the community really quickly jumps on and provides some additional suggestions for places you might not have known to look, for additional records that might exist, or for information that you already have in your possession that you just need to look at in a little bit of a different way. Brick walls, some of them come tumbling down fairly easily when we just put it out there and get some assistance. Some of them, like my John O'Brien, have stood for years, in spite of the fact that myself and several other expert genealogists have looked at it for 20 different ways. I have faith and hope that we'll solve it someday, but the information that I need to solve it just hasn't come to light yet. So if you've got a problem, stick it out there on one of our Facebook pages, the page of the group. We'd be happy to help. Until next time, this is Crista Cowan. Have fun climbing your family tree.